Enter Corey Kluber, a guy who pitched 1 inning last year, has won 2 AL Cy Youngs. Pitchers have proven that they can pitch into their mid to late 30s, no problem. Justin Verlander has been ultra successful. Charlie Morton, another guy. So it's not like you're concerned in that sense. But Corey Kluber seems to be walking into a situation where the Yankees aren't necessarily, they're not taking a flyer. They're not trying to see, oh, well, maybe if we can get something from Kluber, that would be great. No. He's coming in. He's their third starter right now, and particularly because Luis Severino is not going to be available to start, Yankees are going to need to get some production out of Corey Kluber.
Yeah, and that's what worries me, exactly what you just said there. They're not taking a guy as like, okay, maybe he can be the fourth or fifth starter. They're asking him to be what he, maybe not exactly what he was, obviously 2-time Cy Young Award winner, but at least something relatively close to it as his age, as a 34-year-old. So that's a lot to ask out of a guy who hasn't pitched in a long time, has obviously faced his fair share of injuries. And because of the lack of depth in this Yankees rotation, he's going to be asked to fill at least, like you said, at least a 3 spot in this rotation, at least until Severino comes back, which I think is another question mark. I mean, we talked about this over the break here. I think Severino's another question mark because he's obviously been hurt. We don't know what we're going to get from him when he comes back. We don't know if we can expect him to be the same pitcher he used to be. You have a guy in Garrett Cole. There's no debating that. He's the ace of this squad. But after that, I get a little nervous, and I don't see Corey Kluber as the full-time answer for that role. I know Jordan Montgomery's there too, and we haven't talked about him. He'll play a decent role in that starting rotation for sure. But I think at best, Corey Kluber for sure could be a number 3 guy. And if you get Severino back and Severino is what he was come playoff time, you have Garrett Cole, Jordan Montgomery, Corey Kluber, and Severino, which is a pretty good, that's all you really need is 4 guys there in the starting rotation. That's pretty good if Severino is what he was. But for me, there's just too many question marks that have me a little concerned. I'm not worried about the Yankees making the playoffs. I'm not even worried about them winning the division because that seems like it's at least more likely than not to happen, especially with this lineup and with DJ LeMahieu back. But this Corey Kluber decision for me, it's certainly an interesting one. It's a cheap one, which is maybe why they did it. It's certainly a good option at Corey Kluber's best. I think he can really help this team. But at its worst, he gets hurt, and then you're really short in that rotation. And Jordan Montgomery's your 2. And after that, you got a bunch of young guys with little experience that I think would overall hurt the Yankees. But I know you feel differently, Nick. I want to get your take on this too.
Well, I don't know that the questions are valid. I recognize those. But again, and as you alluded to, the Yankees are a top 8 team in the American League, no doubt. There's no doubt in my mind that they would be in. So at that point, you got to set your team up for postseason success because you're already in. And when you do that, Garrett Cole at number 1, Severino at number 2, assuming he's healthy. And again, I recognize that's an assumption, but you feel like he'll be good to go. Guys have had pretty good success coming off of Tommy John surgery at this point in Major League Baseball. I don't know that that's too huge of a question mark. I think Kluber is a bigger question mark than Severino. So at him at 2 and then Kluber at 3 and Montgomery at 4, that's to me as good of a rotation as they have run out in the last couple of years. It's pretty darn good. So you're hoping that you can get production out of Kluber. That to me is sort of the linchpin in the whole thing where if it goes south, you could be in trouble. But at the same time, I do think, and again, we were talking about this at the break, Kluber worked with the Yankees training staff in trying to recover. Some of the guys that also work independently of the Yankees during the offseason, and that was somebody who he was training with. So if they feel like he's good to go, and I also recognize some of the questions about the Yankees training staff, the way injuries have happened over the last couple of years. But if they're confident and they think he's good to go, I think that Corey Kluber can be a viable 3rd starter. You're asking him a lot because he's got to be a guy who stays healthy, and that's the question. At the same time, you're not asking him to come in and play the role that he was playing in Cleveland for those number of years of being that number 1 guy and having to go in and pitch to a 2.5 ERA for your team to be successful. No, Corey Kluber just has to come in and be healthy and relatively pitch the way he's capable of doing. And I think you're going to be happy with the contract that they gave him. But as you look at the landscape, that 1 through 4, that's the question to me. It's the rotation. That is what's left for the Yankees, and holding them back from potentially being that bona fide World Series contender that we have been hoping they would be the last number of years. And it was a place where they were outpitched in the ALDS this past year. They were outpitched against Houston in the ALCS in 2019. So they are going to have to find some answers in that starting rotation. But I think this sets up nicely. Now, I would be interested to see if they could potentially bring back a guy like James Paxton at a pretty reasonable number, if he'd be interested in coming back, if he is healthy, because I think that was a huge issue for him last year. I think this team could benefit from another sort of more proven arm. But again, at this landscape of baseball and the money that teams are willing to spend, I don't know that that's realistic. They also have Davy Garcia in that fold as well, who impressed a lot of people towards the tail end of last year. So there's a lot of questions to be answered. But at the same time, assuming that Severino is healthy, which I think you're confident in him, and I think that Corey Kluber is healthy enough, and I'm confident in that sort of situation as well. That 1, 2, 3 is as good as anyone in the American League.
Yeah, and I'm going to disagree with Craig Carton here, who we interviewed earlier, who said, talking about kind of providing excuses for the Yankees not getting to the World Series, haven't been since 2009. And I will recognize that the Yankees are a very solid team and have been probably the best team in New York, at least recently, for sure. So that's something to recognize for this team. But they haven't gotten over the hump, and they haven't gotten to the World Series in a while. And there's something to be said about that. And I think if you're looking at a team, after they got DJ LeMahieu, even talking about DJ LeMahieu before he signed, and I kept thinking to myself, and a lot of people were saying this too, is this still going to be enough? Because this is a very similar team as it was last year. And this team last year, I mean, sure, they ran into a Rays team that you brought up, Nick, that is not really as good as they were. They're not the same team anymore, obviously. But there's always going to be good teams standing in their way in big playoff games, and they haven't been able to get over those teams in years. And the window here of having these young stars like Aaron Judge, like Gleyber Torres, it's kind of shrinking. And at least to have them all affordable and have them all under one team, that window, I think, is shrinking. And you got to have some sort of enthusiasm here if you're the Yankees and think, well, we obviously felt like we had a really good team the last couple of years, but they haven't been able to get to the World Series. So why is that? What is it in our team? Where's the weakest spot that we need to improve? And I think for this team, it's starting pitching, maybe a little bit of bullpen help too, but mostly starting pitching. And just looking at this Corey Kluber deal, I just don't have confidence that it's enough, that it's enough to really get him over the edge, to get them to this World Series that honestly they should be playing in, because they're certainly a good enough team. They've been a good enough team for years. It's honestly a shock they haven't won one yet, obviously since 2009. So I think honestly, when you're looking at this team, you really need one more thing to get them over the hump. I thought starting pitching was going to be that thing, and give them credit. They got Corey Kluber. They got a guy to fill in that role and maybe help until Severino gets back. But it's a ton of question marks. And if I'm a Yankees fan, I'm not overall confident in the way this team is built for October. They're going to win now. They're definitely going to make the playoffs. Like you said, expanded playoffs. But how are they going to do if they face a team that's been on a roll, that's been hot lately? I don't know who it's going to be. Who knows? Or even in the World Series facing a really solid team, whoever that may be. How are they going to be? How are they going to hold up? It's just a lot of question marks for me, I must say.
I mean, I agree with you to a point, but at the same time, who is that team going to be? Like, when you look at the landscape of the American League, I don't see it. And sometimes it's sort of the battle of attrition where you keep just running the same guys out there at times that have had success. I mean, you can't just, your team's not good, don't run the same guys out there. But this has been a team that has had success and has been good. And then you look at the landscape of everything else, and it's like, I don't know who challenges them. They're on paper have to be the favorites to come out of the American League. Of course, the point is now dealing with the Dodgers and some of the other teams in the National League. I think the Padres as well, staking a claim to being a really deep team in the NL West. But I don't know who that other team is in the American League right now. I mean, when you look at it, the Astros are not, they made a run. They had a losing record last year and were able to win a playoff series. So good for them. But I don't see them being a team that's able to challenge the Yankees. They're good enough on offense. They're going to lose Michael Brantley, presumably, to that lineup. And Justin Verlander is also coming off of Tommy John surgery. At him, a much more advanced age than Luis Severino. The Rays have traded away Blake Snell and are making a couple of other moves, and I think that they will be good. I am not disagreeing with that. They always are a team that will compete, but you lose Blake Snell, that's a huge deal. So as much as you want to be critical or say, oh, it hasn't happened, well, maybe this is the year. Maybe this is the year that they're able to get over the hump, because when I look at the landscape of the American League, I just don't see who challenges them right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a valid point, but I just think about the last couple of years, and it feels like the Yankees have been the favorite in the American League, at least last year. I know 60 games is a shorter season, so sure. And then they didn't expect the Rays to be what the Rays were, and the Rays kind of came out of nowhere for sure. Even the Astros, I think, were better than expected in 2020. But I'm looking at the past, and I'm looking at past Yankees teams, and it seems like these conversations come up a lot. Like, this is our year. This is a really good team. This team is built for the World Series, and they keep falling short. And I don't know why. I don't understand why. And it seems to be a different sort of weakness for each team. But this weakness is starting pitching, and it's very obvious. And I know you're going to, there's an argument, well, the Yankees don't necessarily have the spending freedom to go out and get a big name like Trevor Bauer or something like that. And that's okay. I guess I kind of understand that, although it's the New York Yankees. So when have the New York Yankees have a problem spending money? I'm not so sure.
In 2021.
I guess so, but I don't know. I feel like other teams are going out and making moves. You look at the Mets, they're making big moves. Obviously, Steve Cohen and his checkbook will help there. But honestly, I can't get over the starting pitching problem. I can't look past it. I think this very well could be the year for the Yankees. It could be the year, just like the last couple of years could have been the year for the New York Yankees. I'm not saying it can't be, because if the pieces come together, Corey Kluber avoids injury and pitches well, Severino comes back, pitches well, come playoff time, those four, in addition to Montgomery and Garrett Cole, of course, I think are for sure the favorites. With that, especially with that lineup, they're for sure the favorites. They can run out Garrett Cole as many times as he can. And I'm not doubting that. I'm just doubting if all those guys can get there and be as successful as they were. And the fact that over the last couple of years, they haven't done it. They haven't delivered when people have said, this Yankees team is World Series bound. This Yankees team is the best team in the American League, and they haven't delivered. So that worries me.
I understand it. I get it. At the same time, I think that it's best to look at these teams independently. It's a new team. It's a different team. And the landscape of the league is certainly looking a lot differently. And they probably should have been there in 2017 based upon what we know now. So, how does that change things, or what do things look like if that had gone differently? Of course it did not, but that's also something to keep in mind. I like where the rotation is at right now. I think we can agree to disagree, Sam, here. I think that Corey Kluber can come in and make an impact, and I'm interested to see what the Yankees will get from him, because I think that if he's healthy enough, and that, of course, is the question that no one can really answer well right now, I think the Yankees will have hit a home run with Cole, Severino, and Kluber at the top. That's as good as it gets in the American League, especially with the Rays trading off Blake Snell.